Wrecker, my brother, what's going on?
Nick, you have a very nice green hoodie, I guess. What is that?
Yeah, Irish, dude, fighting
Oh,
Irish.
of course, your leprechaun thing. Yeah, I
The
got you.
fighting Irish. Yeah, it's my
Yeah,
hoodie. I got back from the gym, so. And then you have this beautiful long hair on the top of your head. It's shaggy.
it's shaggy. Yeah, I'm. Oh no, I have all sorts of weird things I could say though, but I won't. Yeah, it's getting very long. I like it.
That's good. Hey, so I know this is going to annoy you, but I want to do it anyway. And that'll lead into our topic today. So, you know, the Academy of Management. This is the
No,
conference
never
that
heard of it. What is
you're always
that?
annoyed that I keep plugging and I keep talking about. It's the world's biggest management conference. Well, it's always in the US. This year, meaning 2025, for the first time ever, as far as I know, maybe it was before years ago, but it's in Copenhagen in August or July, and last week of July, first week of August, somewhere around there. And the deadline, the reason I want to tell you this is the deadline for everything, papers and uh, PDW proposals, symposia proposals are due beginning of January. So I wanted to tell you this. CTO is the whatever communications digital technology division. Uh, it's the one where we do all the AI, data science, algorithmic management, right? It's like qualitative researchers, it's machine learning people, it's econometricians, it's design science people, all coming together in the same division. And and yeah, so it'll be really cool. Due January. That's the plug. But this does lead into our current discussion. And here's why. Have you heard of this thing? It's the Swedish Center for Digital Innovation. Have you heard of this thing?
Yeah, I heard of it, and I can tell you why, because just, I don't know, a day or two ago, I saw that they did a plug themselves of their upcoming digital innovation doctoral research seminar, where some of my students attended over the last couple of years. And what they do is they do a bit of, theory online session and then take you to the to the wilderness, like deep down in Sweden, where you go and, do research on digital innovation and go skiing, like in the true north.
All right.
It's really cool,
Yeah.
actually.
They don't ski up there. It's flat. They just eat reindeer, is what they do. All right. So with that said, we figure so anyway, Swedish Center for Digital Innovation, they're sponsoring doctoral consortium, junior faculty consortium, along with the House of Innovation, Stockholm School of Economics, right? Magnus.
Absolutely.
But we have our good friend Jonny Holmström with us today. Hey, Johnny.
Hey, good to see you.
And thanks for sponsoring that. You're awesome. So the doctoral consortium and the junior faculty consortium will be due in the spring, right? Doctoral is for PhD students, junior faculty is for postdocs and untenured faculty. But but yeah, so those will be due. The applications for that are like April or something. But yeah, anyway, so Johnny and his gang, it's like Umeå University, Gothenburg University,
And
and
Stockholm.
Stockholm, right? Johnny, when did you create this SCDI thing?
Well, it's a long story, but to cut that very short, there's a lot of serendipity going on. Like, whenever you do something that is turning out well, you could either take the credit for it or just be honest and say that there's some blind luck. So we we created the SCDI in 2013,
Oh,
and
wow.
we had a conversation with a guy that I initially didn't know that he was a well-known entrepreneur, but in the conversation, he was really engaged with what we're doing, and one of the things that we had been doing was to work closely together with a mining company, and he used to own that mining company,
Of
as you
course.
See,
do.
record,
As
record. That's what they do in they don't ski, they mine.
well,
They-
yeah, some
Well,
Wait,
people do.
have you ever seen that movie? What is it with that Finnish guy who kills everyone? Sisu?
I'm lost now, but
I've got to
Finns are
cut that
more
out of this
aggressive than
podcast. Yeah,
Swedes.
exactly.
Why?
So, Johnny, just to catch up listeners, so the SCDI, you said we had a conversation, etc. Can you talk a little bit about what it is so we know that three universities involved and
Yeah.
who was involved from the start? It was you, of
Well,
course. Who
Rickard.
else?
so basically, initially we had a conversation with Umeå and Gothenburg, and that was really, we've had collaborations for many, many years. My buddy Ola Hemfridsson, when he left Umeå, he moved to Gothenburg, and of course, that sort of tightened that connection. But then this rich entrepreneur, his name is Carl Bennett. He sort of really liked that we were working with sort of digital innovation in the context of mining. And he said, basically, okay, I'm going to fund your research center. And we're like, well, we don't have a research center. We just have like two different research groups. And then he said, well, basically, that's what we're going to do. We're going to sort of use my donation to launch a center. So it wasn't really our idea. So that was just blind luck.
That's cool.
So wait, is that no strings attached? Like, can you sit down and write theories all the time? So I'm asking because, if an entrepreneur comes in and says, like, I like what you're doing, and here's, let's build a center, which is a fair bit of money involved, then usually they want to see something in return. What are they just being philanthropic?
No, I mean, I think one of the things that I've been doing for many years is to just give presentations for industry, and I think they really enjoy that we are blending sort of traditional industries with digital and AI, and it seems to sort of stir up some sort of energy. But in this case, no strings attached, and we've had a couple of other donations along the way, and there's been string attached, like we're mandated to host yearly conferences and stuff like that. So sometimes you'll have strings attached, sometimes not. And then later on, I think 2018, Stockholm joined, and again, Magnus Maring and I have been sort of working together for many years, knew each other as PhD students, and it seems like a natural thing. And also, like I told Magnus, we can't really have Swedish Center for anything if we don't have the capital on board. So yeah, but it's a sort of momentum going on now, and we also have faculty sort of leaving Umeå, going to Gothenburg, and vice versa. So
I think this is fantastic, Nick. Is there anything like this in the US, like a national, like beyond one university alone, alliance/network? I'd love to have something like this in Germany. What I see every university is doing, they're creating their own centers for whatever. Yeah. So Hamburg is asking me to create a center for something, but like, what's the point? Like, so the idea of having a national center, or, a combination of universities where you have exchange of students, you have exchange of postdocs, benefit from multiple supervisors, and as you said, faculty moving to and fro. That, like, to me, this sounds brilliant.
Yeah, but in the business school, we don't. Outside of the business school, we totally do. Like at Notre Dame, we have a few of these. We have this computational chemistry, CCAS, and it's us and 8 other universities, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's led. So in the sciences, we have tons of these things. But yeah, I can't think in business schools. There are a couple. There was this. It was the old International Motor Vehicle Program out of MIT, and now it's the Mac Institute out of Penn. But it's still kind of cross MIT, Penn, and a couple other universities. So they're there in business schools. But yeah, you're right. It's not as like we don't have this. But Jonny, all right. So when I think of you, you're someone who, when you started doing your research, you're very steeped in social theory, like actor network theory and things like that. But if I look at the guy I know now in the last decade, you're very, of course, you're writing a bunch of papers. You're prolific. You have a ton of PhD students. But you do a lot with industry, and you probably do more with industry than the average person. And I know you have, so I don't know. All right. So I'll give you my perspective on industry and how we engage with industry. And then you tell me, because I know you have a different view. But I generally think that our teaching should be for industry. The stuff I teach, oftentimes when I do consulting, it's stuff we knew 30 years ago. Right. I'm teaching them basic change management, project management, stuff like that, architecture principles. Right. So when you do consulting, it's stuff we knew 20 years ago that they're just not doing. When you do teaching, it's the stuff that we talk about with digital and everything. But when you do research, it's such minutia. It's such a tiny thing that it's not really something that practitioners, rarely is it something practitioners are interested in. Practitioners are interested in the stuff from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? That's my general experience. Now, that's not what you do, right? You teach and you have a different kind of philosophy on these things, right?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, I think you're wrong. Even by American standards, I don't think that worldview is correct. At least I hope it's incorrect. But basically, for me, you talk about like the theory heavy side and the practice side. That is really deeply rooted in the sort of Scandinavian tradition of IS, and I think we are a little bit torn in Scandinavia, and we've always been that because we've had this heavy sort of leaning towards theory. So, when I was a PhD student, my professor was deeply engaged with C. West Churchman, and there's this momentous book, Design of Inquiring Systems, and we were really sort of, force-fed that. And one of the things that I took away with, from that, obviously, is that depending on what kind of inquiring system you sort of depart from, the world will appear in different ways. So I sort of ended up not engaging too much with that, but it sort of was my sort of segue into actor network theory. But then we also have this sort of deep engagement with practice. And we've had that in Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark. And to me, it's really natural. And then doing my postdoc at Georgia State University, I was assuming that this is the way that people operate. And it turned out it
No.
wasn't.
Yeah.
And in a sense, you could argue that I had some edge with that background, but I also had some really sort of distinct disadvantages. That was quite clear. I worked with Dan Roby, people like Mark Kyle, and they were so good at stuff that I hadn't really started to think about. So, the
Dude,
whole
you
I
haven't told me why I'm wrong. You're giving me your history. Why am I wrong? I
no,
gave you my.
this is sort of the background, and it's sort of also the way in which I try to sort of keep having these two sort of dimensions in play, the sort of theoretical heavy aspect and the practice aspect. So when I give workshops for practitioners, what they do is basically asking me about things that they are currently struggling with. So
Yeah.
looking at the past few sort of workshop themes I've had, I have this one thing that I've been doing for a couple of years now on AI readiness. So basically, having a workshop with the management team and assessing their AI readiness. And I spun that off as a paper in Business Horizons. And that is really not old stuff. They're engaging with like formation of their AI strategy. Another thing is, prompt engineering, which is like, how do we do this? We've heard about it. We have no idea how to do it. So I give a workshop on prompt engineering. So it's all about, them being honest about stuff they're struggling with. And when I sort of shaped my workshop on prompt engineering, I really hadn't sort of done much research on that. So it sort of was an evolving thing, constructing knowledge together with people from practice.
Can I jump in a little bit? Sorry,
Yep.
Johnny, because I know your AI readiness framework, and I remember quite vividly when you were building that. I don't know, I may have visited you around the time. It's fairly young, right? It came out a couple of years ago. Now I noticed it's your third most cited paper, which speaks for itself, but it also says something because you've been around for a couple of decades as well, right? So I am thinking that Nick's point about, well, we do narrow little theory stuff. I don't think that's true because what the world wants to see is the relevant stuff. And it even shows in the citation. If you look around what people are citing, they're not citing the the tiny little detail we add to institutional logics here and there. But boy, do they want to see an AI maturity framework? Do they want to see a readiness scale? Do they want to see a framework for diagnosing whatever? Yeah. So, is that only me? But at least over the last decade, I find that practically relevant papers, also by far outside for whatever that measure
Yeah,
is worth, right? Is theoretical papers.
Yeah, but record, bear with me for a second. And
Okay.
Jonny, first of all, your AI readiness is wonderful, but your AI readiness paper, we've had 20, 30 years of IT readiness. We've had every McKinsey, Gartner, Deloitte, PwC has their AI readiness inventories. Throw a rock, you'll hit an AI readiness inventory. You got yours published in Business Horizons before the other 30 people did. I would argue your AI readiness is great. Practitioners will love it. You can do tons of consulting. It's not research, right? You use some logic. You I in no way am doing this to insult you. It's just that there's this continuum of research, right? And there's top level research, and then there's consulting projects. And consulting projects usually want us to solve problems, help them with what they're dealing with today. And I would argue your AI readiness paper does that, right? It's really useful. It's not necessarily a research contribution, or is it? Am I being
no.
I'm being a little provocative here? And is it or isn't it an AI readiness? Is it a research contribution?
So I'm nowadays serving at the editorial board for Business Horizons, and we're quite clear about this being a practitioner outlet.
Yeah.
Is it? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think a lot of scholars find it and partly enjoy it, but I think Nick is spot on. I mean, this is oriented towards practitioners and just providing them with some sort of tools for thoughts, basically.
Yeah, and I would argue the research contribution of readiness and that sort of thing is great. And it's like change management. It's like it's system development, right? We've known the basic principles of these things, and there are some research contributions in these things that matter to practice immediately, but the vast majority don't. The vast majority are dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and if it's going to be a research contribution. But if we're doing something for practitioners in Business Horizons, if we're writing a book for practitioners, if we're doing anything like that, then chances are it's not a research contribution.
Let me do a different pitch, because I don't like this word research contribution at all, because I do think there's a lot of research contribution. I think what you mean is theoretical contribution in some particular understanding. Let me do a twofold pitch.
Wait, let's push on that, because when I say and when you say theoretical, you want to dismiss it. But what do we have that practitioners don't? They have all the methods we have. They have all the data that we don't have. They have a bunch of frameworks, and consultants have tons of frameworks, right? So what do we have that practitioners don't? The only thing we have is our cumulative body of knowledge. And
I
we
disagree.
Codify that in theory.
Okay, I know that argument you've been making multiple times, and I think you're right.
Well, you tell me, what do we have?
I think you're right, but it's not exhaustive. I think we have more. And one of the other things we have more is we have a different understanding of data, and we have a different understanding of methods and rigor and these types of analysis. I've seen applied business analytics, data science is what they do, and it's not the same as what a trained econometrician would do. I see people do A/B tests. It's not the same as when we do experiments. So I think this understanding of how we do fact finding and evidence-based decision making is a different level. Now, this is not to say we're doing it better, in other words, but it's a different thing. And for most parts, the way they do it is just fine for their purposes, because they don't have to worry like we do with type 1 and type 2 errors or something like this.
You're saying
it doesn't
we're more
really matter
rigorous.
that much. We are more rigorous. We have a different understanding of data and how to deal with them. It's not only theory, it's also method, to put it very simple. So I want to make two arguments. First, this is going to be the negative part. The negative part is I just chuckle at the idea of a journal, Business Horizon, that published by Elsevier, I think, calling itself a practitioner journal. By the way, it's the same as me chuckling at MIS Quarterly Executive being a practitioner journal. I would posit no practitioner reads that thing. is
Oh,
we're telling
yeah, all right.
ourselves that this is a practitioner journal,
Nope,
but
untrue.
it's
I have used business. I've used Johnny's, your digital
you have
innovation one,
you're not a
in my
practitioner.
executive classes, right?
Yes,
In
but
my,
you're an academic. Of course, you're using academic journals that label themselves with whatever. But if you call yourself a practitioner journal, I'm thinking that your audience will be practitioners. That is not correct. You're speaking to academics who then speak, teach, do something with practitioners. But it's still an academic journal for academics. You know what I
what
mean?
about
This is
California
not
Management Review? What about
even there. I haven't
Sloan
seen
Management Review,
data.
Harvard Business Review?
Well, the only one or two exceptions where you could probably argue and probably get some data on that actually executives and practitioners read is HBR and SMR. I've
Yeah,
heard
but
some
here's
that
the
say they
thing. Where do
read that.
executives read? They read in their MBA program and in their executive MBA program. And that's
No, you
when
know where
we
they read?
academics put them in the folders for them to
No,
read for that
they read
session.
they read in the newspaper, they read on their iPad, they read in in-flight magazines. That's where they read. They don't read our journals, even if we label them practitioner journals.
But they do when they're in class. In my classes, they'll read Johnny's
So this is this
paper
is
on
you know this is a
digitalization.
this is a debate of nomenclature, right? I'm just saying I think it is misleading if we call our journals practitioner journals. By the way, ISJ has a practitioner paper section. Now I've published a couple of papers in the practitioner section. I like them because it's a vehicle for me to publish nice cases. But I'm under no illusion that some CIO is actually picking that up. I think Johnny's going to read that. And I think Nick is going to read that. And some of my fellow colleagues. And maybe they use it for teaching or whatever. But I don't think that the Qantas CEO or the Lufthansa CXO is going to read my ISJ paper just because it has practitioner paper in the title.
Johnny, you're on the board of Business Horizons. Is Recker right, or do practitioners
Uh,
actually read this?
I think the cynical side of me will agree with him, but I think it's a worthwhile effort to try
Oh, yeah,
to sort of just connect with practice a little bit better.
absolutely. That's
And
not what I said.
no,
And I
no,
fully
no,
agree
no,
with
but
you.
and I think you're right. I think the majority of the emails I get about my Business Horizon papers will be from academics, but they're different in orientation, and I think of them of these paper as practice papers.
So do I.
I mean, I guess I'm on the fence here, but I think in general, I think we just need to find a way to be a little bit smarter in engaging with practitioners. And you know, I I initially felt, starting out as a researcher, that I'm gonna go to a big organization and tell them, hey, do you want to have me and my postdocs and my PhD students running around here conducting interviews and doing sort of studies of whatever's happening here, and then in 2 years from now we're going to submit something to MISQ that you will never read. And of course, they're not really dying to do that. So I'm trying to sort of build this sort of portfolio of stuff where, again, these workshops that I'm doing for them, I'm doing that largely to for them to open the doors for my postdocs and my PhD students to start collecting data. So I think we need to be a little bit more creative in how we connect with practice. I think we're scratching on the surface.
And I
Yeah.
think this is the second part I wanted to say, because like if we forget about the nomenclature of what we call certain journals or certain papers, I think what you're doing, and this is why I'm so in love with SCDI and what you're doing specifically, I think this is a wonderful strategy and orientation to do research in the business school. One that is not treating it as separate ends, which is a little bit what Nick sometimes is doing, saying, here's the proper research in theory and here's practice, but sort of trying to consider it as one. And I like that too, because I think it's a wonderful it's actually a niche strategy in a way, because so few people are doing this. No one in the US is doing this, very few. Even in Europe, where a lot of people are doing the same model as the Americans, we see fewer and fewer. Germany used to be a place with a lot of applied industry focused research, maybe too much. but now it's shifting the other way. So I like it very much. Like the fact that you have papers on the newspaper industry, the forestry industry, the mining industry, all these classical industrials firm, and the question, how do they deal with digital innovation? Not the Teslas of this world, not the 27th case study of Amazon and Uber. No. How does the freaking mining company deal with digital technologies? Because at the end of the day, they're digging holes in the ground to get ore out, right? I always love this focus on the real, the practice. It's not as sexy. It's sometimes not as innovative. In fact, very often it's quite mundane.
Right. So this is the issue. This is the issue. When you say what you're saying, then I immediately would think, all right, so there are two issues. One is who's doing research that's relevant to practice? Well, my colleague Ahmed Abbasi, he was on here. He was talking about how he's moving methods forward for A/B testing, and we talked about that paper. It's coming out in MISQ, and that's one of those that is actually way ahead of practice and also a research contribution. So in the more technical areas, in particular, you will find that they're on this cutting edge and they're doing technical stuff. That the problem with the mining company is this: when you're looking at the mining company implementing digital technologies, what are they doing? Well, in the end, they're pulling rocks out of the ground like they've been doing since 1800 or whenever this mining company started. So what are you really doing? Well, you're talking about the business processes and automating them. So when we look at our knowledge about how to automate business processes and supply chains and organizational process, we've been doing that for 100 years. You can't pretend that, it's AI, everything's changed. No, we're going to inherit everything we've been doing with every other automation technology for the last 100 years. It's going to look exactly like that. And there will be a little twist with AI. Whatever that little twist is, Johnny's going to find it and he'll point it out. And that's the research contribution, is that tiny little twist. But that's not what the mining company wants. The mining company wants an AI implementation strategy, right? Which is the same as every other IT implementation strategy that they've ever had in the last 100 years, right? Johnny, is this fair?
No, yeah, and I think they don't necessarily look for our MISQ papers, and this is what we live for. So we need to give them a lot of different things, and this is why I'm like a circus clown doing all these workshops and stuff like that, so we can get access to the data. And I think you're spot on, Nick, when it comes to if we're pushing for the top papers, we did an MISQ 2020 on ABB and the way they've been sort of pushing automation, especially in the mining industry. We need to look at automation over time. And, the recent digital push is only a part of our discussion section. So we need to be very, very precise when it comes to the top papers. We can be a little bit more sort of sweeping when it comes to the quick hits. But I really enjoy that sort of mix when it comes to the sort of paper pipeline portfolio. But hey, I think we're looking at a situation now that is so global. I mean, we have six new postdocs coming in after New Year, and they want top publications. So the pressure for them to publish is on, and we need to respect that, and we need to help them to succeed with that. But the thing is, I'm trying to do both. I'm trying to sort of push for some sort of practical implications, and I don't mean the sad sort of section we put at the end of our papers. I mean, real practical implications. And then alongside with the sort of theoretical contributions, which is
but you don't do that in the same paper, right? You do one paper in Business Horizons that the practitioners will read, and then you spend the next. Like we're doing that with IBM. We're working with them on ROI of AI ethics investments, right? So as a researcher, the first thing we did is looked at, well, ROI of AI ethics is going to be like any other ROI in an investment. So let's go look. But that's not what firms want. Firms want to see an ROI calculator for AI investments.
Yeah.
But all the research work. So we have a couple papers where we are kind of practitioner outlets. California Management Review, IBM's putting one out on their website, and those are what practitioners want. And we are in year two now of data collection and data analysis of 30 of IBM's customers, right? Where one day we're going to get a paper out. Okay, so it's almost like you have to do both. You have to do the short things that make them happy, and then while at this, you have the data, and then where they're not paying attention, you have to do the long thing
Well, yeah,
that they may or may not be interested in.
this is my idea right now that you're right about this. I would hope to be able to write papers that can do both, but currently I I don't seem capable enough to do that. So this is why I sort of have the sort of long-term projects and then the short-term project, which is a little bit quicker and the quicker turnaround. But hey, I just hope we can sort of allow for practice to have more of a sort of relevant part of our scholarly conversations in the future.
Let's talk about this a little bit more because I think this is spot on, right? So, Nick, for example, you and I remember a couple of years ago we studied Ubisoft, the video game producers, went to Paris, talked to the people, looked around, which was awesome. We wrote that practitioner paper first, appeared in CMR a couple of years ago about data-based innovation in video games. Basically, we never wrote the theoretical paper, and I think, because there wasn't any issue, right? So it's sort of like this was a nice paper, and it's kind of like I use it in MBA teach, at least I have for a while, but I don't know what the theoretical issue was. So we never did that. Then, of course, we all have some papers where, this is the great theoretical piece in MIS Quarterly on something. Like in my case, maybe conceptual modeling. There's no equivalent in a HBR or any other practitioner outlet because that paper is really only of interest to people that worry about assumptions in conceptual modeling, say. But then again, there are some papers where you could say, look, this fits both our audience. I'll give you one example from my own. We did a simulation model to estimate performance implications of digital disruption strategies in comparison to other types of strategies, and it has some quirky little nuanced insights. And then once that was out, we approached SMR. We wrote a slow management review, 2,000 words, two-page version of that.
Right? Yeah.
And my question to you is, like, do you do that all the time? Because it's always more work, isn't it? Like after the CMR paper, we said, like, let's forget about the other one. And usually after the theory paper, we don't necessarily go to the length and say, let's write yet another paper and translating that. Right? Or am I wrong? Do you do that all the time, Jonny? Write two papers?
Sometimes I end up writing just one paper because, what I try to do is to dip my toes into some sort of new practice and see what's happening. And I'm easily bored. If I don't like what I see, I'm walking away. But if I see something that fascinates me, I'm going to stay there and I'm going to sort of push harder. So right now I've been working with this organization on various sort of types of AI, and most recently generative AI. And whenever it turns up there, I'm intrigued. So I'm going to stay there for a while. So, but I've written a handful of sort of papers that have been like the one case from that organization.
But the sad part is, I don't mind, right? So I was just reminded of Tom Davenport. I mean, he made a career out of writing these types of papers, didn't he?
Yeah, but really, if you look at Tom Davenport and if you analyze his career, he was first. He was the first one to write the book, book more often than not, but book or paper before everyone else. Whether it's process innovation in 1990, enterprise systems in 98, and then everything since then, he's just quick. He sees it and then writes about it quicker. I almost think that Tom Davenport he almost reflects the general sentiment, but just gets it out quickly. And this is one of the things that, and God, I mean, he's one of the great figures in but I think a lot of people aren't Tom Davenport and they're trying to do that. They're trying to chase, I want to write the first paper on this, because they see that the first paper often gets all the references, right? So we end up not being very scholarly or researchy about it. We just want to be first. And yeah, I don't think that's...
Well, isn't that a big problem with academia today, that people are worried too much about citations? And in fact, I see a lot of embarrassing examples where people are are pushing that envelope too hard. And I think you can actually ruin your reputation if if you're pushing that too aggressively.
But
Yeah.
Uh,
you can flip that as well. I'm totally with you, Johnny. But you also I sometimes also see profiles with people that have 30 management signs and a total of 50 citations. You know?
Yeah.
That's the
But no
same.
one's
Like
reading it. Yeah.
they're writing all this beautiful paper that apparently no one even bothers to read.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think so you can say, Johnny, like you write a lot of these practice the single case, and that could be dangerous, not for you, of course, but for your next generation students, right? Because they will not get tenure based on the Business Horizon paper. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but this is part of the reality that we live in, right, Rob?
yeah, yeah,
Right?
and this is, something I'm very mindful over. I mean, I try to make sure that all my students or postdocs get a hit in one of the basket journals. And by the way, in Europe, we count all the basket journals, not only like two of them. So for me, for instance, information and organization has always been my favorite journal. I couldn't care less if that is not ranked as high as some other journal. But I guess I'm blessed in the sense that I started in this business before all the metrics
Yeah.
mania started. But I have worked with postdocs where I have talked about, well, let's spin that idea off to this journal, to INO, for instance, and they look at me like, well, why would we do that? It's not
Yeah.
a top
That's a shame,
journal.
huh? Yeah.
And this is where shits get global. I mean, I get students from the US trained at American business schools, and I respect how they think, and I'm trying to sort of just ingrain the idea that, for instance, INO is a top journal.
Well, all right. So this is what we do, Johnny. First of all, INO, depending on which list, is it. So if you look at the NYU tops list, so you could just Google NYU Stern tops. It's the tops department, which is the IS and Operations and Statistics
Mm.
department at NYU Stern, and they have a list of journals because they're like us at Notre Dame, where it's very cross-disciplinary, right? In my department, we have operations people, we have IS, we have statisticians, and everybody, computer scientists. Um, but they have econ journals, they have general science journals, and they have INO, JMIS, ISR, MISQ. They have a number of them that they just say these are all top tier. And their argument for INO, information and organization, is that uh, many of the best papers, if you look at the best papers of the last, say, 20 years in the field of information systems,
A lot of
so
them were, I know.
they're like the second journal, I think, after MISQ for winning best papers. So that was part of the justification, and there are really beautiful papers there. So depending on which list, because now the expanded basket, it's on the list. I think there's, of course, the UT Dallas, then there's FT50, then there's the. So what you want to do is, I think, to just have a narrow view of a list, we want to instead have this like more expansive view of. So I think INO will count for tenure, sorta, at places, right? It's one of those things where MISQ and ISR are always going to count anywhere, but then every other journal you can make an argument for depending on how. And if it's a good article, it's a good article. People should read it.
Yeah, but then you also have this sort of trend towards us opening up towards other disciplines, and I just find that so interesting. All of a sudden, since digital and AI is a hot topic in say org science, org studies, we can publish there, and I think we should.
And we do.
I think we
Some
do,
people
and
do.
just looking at some of my younger colleagues and talking to them about where do you want to submit this, sometimes, quite often these days, they will opt for non-IS outlets, which is it's a
Interesting.
big part of our future, I think, to just you know
It's maybe what Nick said last time that the single departments, maybe their time is gone, and what we see more are these blended departments, like IT and operations or IT and strategy or digital and org, whatever, right? So, I mean, if you go to AOM, you can now go to OMT, TIM, and CTO, and you could argue they're basically the same, right? All three
So
of them.
yeah. All right. So Wrecker, you and this is to kind of change the topic, but to go, I'm going to append my original idea about what practitioners want, because you mentioned the thing that you thought was relevant for practitioners, and we worked with a big company, had their call center data, and I published it in Journal of Operations Management, right? And there were some cool insights, whatever, and but that went right back to the company, in the exact published form. And they used it to think through their call center operations, right? So I think if you look at the operations world, there is some stuff that's very, as a matter of fact, it's only practitionerly relevant. That's why they don't cite it, because it's solving a particular practice problem. So they sometimes doesn't really grab purchase in scholarship. Then there's the technical kind of frontier. I guess when I was talking about my view of what practice and what research, it's my kind of research, which is org level. So I'm not an individual level researcher and I'm not a technical researcher. I look at organizational processes, routines, teams, stuff like that. Um, and for me, most of what I see when I go out to organizations, right? I did this for a living before I came to academia, and I still work with organizations. And whenever I'm in that team routine or even strategy, or, when you go up from individuals and you look at what they're missing the fundamentals, right? It's like their management is not doing proper execution of, say, a change process. They're not doing proper project management. They're not
They're not,
doing,
yeah.
and so in my world, I think I stand by what I said, which is usually when I do consulting, I have to bring out the fundamentals from like the 90s and 2000s and just get them doing in consulting. Practitioner, sometimes you take those fundamentals, you just tweak it a little, you get a practitioner outlook paper. And I have a few of those. That's not been my area. Um, but then research from in my world is theory, right? That's how we move it forward. We use methods, but in my area, we generally are not making machine learning advancements, right? Where we might use machine learning as a new clever way to do organizational research. So I realized that my whole previous diatribe about what practice needs and what we do is for my particular type of research and probably doesn't apply to all the different types of IS
So
research.
let me qualify what I said then. I think what I meant to say was that we have more to offer the practice than theory. And what practitioners, in my experience, tend to value is A, the different perspective. You could call that the theory, like a different way to conceptualize and look at things. But B, also the ability to handle data and do this different, like the method expertise. And I would add to that C, the ability to just like observe and reflect. Yeah, very often they just like when we work with firms, what they like very often is like we just accompany them and offer a reflection tool, like a mirror into how they're doing things, because they're so goddamn busy running 27 projects that they're not realizing that they're actually violating 24 principles of good project management practice. So very often, like by us giving them a report later on, this is what you did well, this is what you did poorly, this is how you could improve yourself, this is a standard you might follow. They love that stuff because they don't have time for this. They don't have a resource sitting around just observing and reflecting on what they're doing. They're all just doing. Yeah. So the challenge, of course, is to bring both of them together. Jonny, I wanted to ask you something very particular. Let's say we convince a few people and say, like, I want to bring industry and theory together. I want to do practice and theory. Where do we start? What should like the next assistant professor? What are they doing? Should they, do they give some talks? Like, how do we find practice? How do we mingle?
Well, I think it's a team sport. I think, it's difficult to do that on your own. Like one assistant prof in Hamburg starting out, like, hey, I want to embark on this road. So I think it's difficult to be a lone ranger when it comes to
Yeah.
engage scholarship. And we're like over 80 people at SCDI now. So there's always, we may have a good case. We can throw in a handful of postdocs, which makes it a powerful project. But I think to your point about, what we're good at, I think we need to stick to that, because one of the things that I quite often get is, this comment that I'm good at bridging the practitioner academia gap. You know, I've never had any interest at all in doing that. In fact, I'm trying to sort of maximize that gap. And I think what we are good at, if we are,
Maximize the gap.
well,
What do you
yeah,
mean?
I mean, so for instance, if to give you one example, I was in a workshop a while ago with this public organization, and they're pushing for an AI tool to be used in HR. So basically, an AI tool for hiring.
Like a people
And
analytics thing. Hmm.
I found it interesting, and they were passionate about it. But when they talk, I picked up on a couple of, you know, issues that I don't think they've dealt with. And we are so trained in doing that because this is what we do with our students. And all of a sudden, I laid out this sort of elaboration on what's the difference between structure and agency. And I don't think most consultants will go down that road.
So
Absolutely
you're
not.
talking about structure and agency with practice with practitioners. And did they look at you like, what are you smoking, dude? Why are you like
They are so smart, and maybe I'm talking about the smartness of Swedish people here, but in general, the people we're
Oh,
talking
did you
to,
hear that, Wrecker? The snobby,
Mm.
because
Oh,
they only
I
do
gotta
that when
go.
they
I
talk
gotta
to.
go to. I want to go back to Sweden.
They only do that when they talk to Americans. They don't do that when they talk to Germans. They're just like, oh, it's a dumb American, so let me tell you about Sweden.
no, but I think it's true on a global scene that the people we talk to are so well trained, and they are hungry for these types of workshop where you can actually push them outside of their comfort zone, and this is where they learn. And you can't really talk about, in this case, the stupidity of pushing this AI project, because one of the stupid things was that it was illegal, according to Swedish law. But I mean, you need to balance structure and agency, and we cannot avoid that conversation. So, and I think it's respectful to these practitioners to just, you know, engage in these conversations because they are deadly smart, and we are good at running workshops. I mean, this is we've
Yeah.
been doing it since forever, and I think this is really fun to do. And again, I'm trying to maximize the sort of distance between them because I am a professor and they're not. And if we
Yeah.
just have a conversation, we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really important to sort of have an idea about how you should proceed with engaged scholarship, when
Yeah,
you're
that's
you're
cool.
in this
That's
situation.
funny that you say that you want to maximize the gap because this year we've been putting an effort to minimize the gap. We said at the beginning of the year, we want to have closer connections to industry because, like Nick, I'm doing firm level research. I need the firms. I need to know, I need to be able to talk to someone. I need to get foot in the door. So this year we did a couple of, you could call them industry events, like roundtables and little conferences and practitioner workshops. And I think, like, there's no paper I can show you right now in December for that effort. Absolutely not. But in 5 years, because now I get
Yeah.
like we had a
Yeah.
CIO there and he liked what we were doing and he was amazed by one of my doctoral students. This is how you open the door to get really, really good data later. And no, Nick knows this like really good organizational internal data. That's a gold mine these days. So, and
Yeah.
I think this strategy really helps you even with your pure research, only targeted eyes are. I still think it makes sense
Yeah.
to mingle and engage a lot with industries, even if that paper was never written for the CIOs and never
Agreed.
will be read by them either. It doesn't have to. Yeah.
No, and also what's happening in that situation is that you are on audition. I mean, they
Yeah.
want to figure out. So this German guy who keeps bragging about his basketball CV, is he really good at research? Can we actually
Wait,
have
all right.
projects with
Wait,
him?
wait, woo!
Wait,
Who's
wait.
that?
For the listeners who haven't listened in the first season and everything, they have to know that what Johnny is talking about is Wrecker was a semi-pro basketball player back in the day and
Yeah,
played
back in the day.
back a long time ago when he was
Yeah.
young and played against Dirk Nowitzki,
Oh, that's
right?
that's that's a big thing.
That's a big deal.
It was a big loss.
And what's
That's what it
funny,
was. A very big loss.
Johnny, did I ever tell you this? One time Wrecker and I played one-on-one.
No, we
I
did not.
beat him.
I heard about that.
No,
I heard.
didn't
Badly.
hear about it. You heard the claim. The reality is this: we didn't even play basketball. We played cornhole for the first time in my life, and I beat him so bad that he cried like a little
I
girl.
didn't
That's
cry,
the
but I
truth.
realized this is what happens when you put an athlete against a non-athlete, right?
No, but I mean, joking aside, I think it's important to know that whenever you have a workshop, you're on audition. They're gonna see
Yeah,
can
I like that.
can we really work with this guy over a longer period? And I don't mind that. If
Yep.
we don't really click, we might as well not try this. But so from my point of view, again, like I don't really see the end game of running a workshop on prompt engineering. I mean, I would rather not do that, but if it's a way for me to get my foot in the door, I'm going to do
Yeah.
it, and then
Yeah.
I'm going to spin out the business horizon paper on it, and then down the road, there's going to be some
All right.
proper research.
And you know what I learned
Absolutely.
today,
I
Recker,
like that.
from this is what I learned today from Johnny. All right. Now, when you talk about prompt engineering, throw a rock, you'll hit someone doing a workshop on prompt engineering. Every consulting firm is doing that. Every website has it. So it's like I don't see that as my value add. I will probably never do a prompt engineering. Now, those who are researching that, sure, maybe they can do it or but I like what Johnny said, which is
Yeah, me
increase the
too.
distance because I've never used structured agency, but the way you were describing it would be imagine that getting some practitioners in a room and then talk to them about structure and agency and then have them apply it. I mean, that's interesting. I don't know how
I
you'd sell them on it, but once you have them in the room, then you could do that to them, right?
I
That's
like
super interesting.
I like that very much because it like what I don't say increase the distance, but I do always say like this is now it's time to perform. When you do go on stage for a little industry event, you got to step up and perform really well. And no, don't bring the slide deck you just prepared for ISIS. Like don't bring that, right? So and bring your A game. So I never thought of it as increasing the distance, but I do think this is a platform where you really need to show off and make an impression on what are actually really smart, very senior people. Like it's very easy for academics to look down upon industry. No, industry leaders, they know what they're doing. Most CXOs that I've met, boy, that's smart people, right? So and you need to impress them somehow, right? That you're also smart and have something of value to them. And you don't do that with the research in progress presentation from AOM last year.
No, and I think it's important for all of us to sort of keep elaborating on our portfolio of sort of methods in which we connect to practice, because there's always going to be another way. So in the December issue of MISQ, there's a new paper out by one of our postdocs, Charlotta Kronblad, and
Yeah, that's a good
what
paper, by the way. Yeah.
what she did was she filed a lawsuit against the city of Gothenburg, and it's a part of their research method. And because she wanted to see the algorithm that they used for, matching students and schools, and it's a wonderful paper. And it's a story about, how she connected to practice by filing a lawsuit. I mean, isn't
That's
that,
too cool.
well, I never done that, but there's always a new way to sort of connect with practice.
That's a nice way to end this episode because that paper is really interesting and really good.
It is.
Yeah, so everyone check that out. It's out now. Yeah, it's available, open access even, I think. Anyway, so people can find it. But that's a great paper, irrespective of the lawsuit.
Yeah. And Johnny, man, it was great having you on board. This was fun. I actually
My
learned
pleasure.
something. Yeah. So this is good. We'll have you back on.
Yeah, and we will meet at the CTO event at any rate in Copenhagen, and
At the
hopefully
very latest.
a lot of people will join us there.
Copenhagen will be a party. Yeah.
And did I get that right? You're sponsoring? The SCDI is
Well,
sponsoring one of the
I
events?
was telling Nick that I had this traumatic experience last time. I didn't get a drink ticket, and I told Nick this can never happen again. So
See, Johnny, what you don't know is that Nick sent me an email 2 days ago asking University of Hamburg to sponsor one of these things to make sure that there's
That's
enough drinks
right.
for everyone. So apparently he goes around shopping with his friends for
My
money.
friends, yeah. So no, Hamburg is, of course, Notre Dame and Cambridge, because Michael Barrett's still part of the leadership. We'll throw some things in, but both of you, that's right, Wrecker, you generously are helping to sponsor a
One of
reception.
them. Yeah, one of the
But
reasons.
Yeah.
also CTO is an amazing arena for meeting people, and it's a fantastic. I would say not necessarily IS only. It's quite cross-disciplinary these days, group, and it's truly one of the highlight of the academic years, and the PDWs, for those of you who haven't attended
They're very
AUM
good.
before, it's always the best thing about AOM.
Yeah, the first 2 days are the professional development workshops, and I think the DC and the JFC, the Doctoral Consortium and Junior Faculty Consortium. So, by the way, so Hamburg, SCDI, Swedish Center for Digital Innovation, the House of Innovation at Stockholm, and also Copenhagen Business School. So those are the four, in addition to Cambridge and Notre Dame, that are sponsoring receptions. So we should have plenty of drinks in Copenhagen in August.
Another reason to go. But let's hope, Johnny, that we get a chance to catch up before August
Yeah,
2025.
Absolutely.
But thanks for coming on, man. It was a blast. Could have talked for hours as we usually do.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
see you.
Bye, guys.